The first time we heard that we were thinking of building a new laundry was in 2013. We had one laundry north of Trondheim and one in the south of Trondheim that had reached their limits. So we considered to build a new, great, modern laundry here in Trondheim because of our customer base. Most of our customers are located in the city of Trondheim anyway, so we planned to invest into state-of-the-art equipment and merge both laundries.
I form av moderne utstyr. Logistikkmessig kunne vi slå sammen de to vaskeriene. I tillegg så legger Nortextil stor vekt på...
Nortextil pays a lot of attention to the working environment for the employees. So we built a new, bright, well-illuminated premises. From an ecological point of view, we managed to reduce emissions, water and energy. The result is here. A large, beautiful building with lots of technology and good equipment.
Nortextil operates 17 laundries in all of Norway. They provide service to all sectors such as hotels, healthcare and offshore. All laundries are highly automated, and Nortextil also has a strong focus on environmental issues. The key to high productivity and a high availability of the equipment is good service and good follow-up. We have a local representative in Trondheim that ensures a fast response. He's been part of our projects from start to finish. He knows the laundry from the inside out, each process and each activity.
Det nye
The
utstyret
new
har
equipment has increased our productivity by 30 to 40%.
40%.
We can process around 2,000 sheets per hour in the ironer line finishing line, where before we could only process 1,200 pieces.
Når det gjelder arbeidsmiljø,
Also, the working conditions are important to us, and particularly the ergonomics. We installed a linen separator that facilitates the separation of larger pieces, making it easier for our operators to handle the linen. We have an automatic height adjustment for the feeding stations, resulting in an increased productivity. We're now working with better capacities, and we're able to acquire several new customers.
The unique Jensen approach, OTC, offer to commissioning, involves the customer in the quotation phase. We use a lot of time listening to his needs, his requirements, and his wishes. And together we combine the best flow to meet his interest in the market. By doing that, we give him a security of his investment by helping him adding the necessary automation, flow in the laundry, etc. NT, the cooperation with Nortextile, has been very, very positive over the 3 projects we just have made over the last 3 years. And there's been a constant better understanding. It's turned into a partnership between the companies with a very high level of trust. What I have noticed working with NT over the last couple of years is the approach of the companies, the similarity of the ideas behind the company. NT being a national company with a very local approach, with a lot of empowerment to the local organization, and Jensen being a global company, being local in the market, also adding a lot of competence to the local people to make sure we meet the customer's needs and demands. That has been one of the key points for the good partnership between Jensen and Nortextile. I'm very proud to sit here today and be able to see that we are very, very happy with the cooperation with NT. It's been a great experience and we look forward to the future.
Many laundries choose to work with many vendors, but Nortec still wishes to work with only one, as we want to experience a more holistic approach to the project. We have one person who is in charge and one person for us to be in touch with. Investment, security and service are better guaranteed with only one supplier.